Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us on a wet and damp, cold evening. It's actually a pleasure to see so many of you, both from within the community and from beyond. For those who are not familiar with the program that we're running here in the Kehillah means the community, is over the last few years, we've been trying to find ways of engaging with people who think differently to us, that come from different backgrounds to us, both those within the Jewish community and those beyond. And we titled the program Then, because this is how sort of the common discourse goes. We sit around our tables and we talk about them. And we've got a lot of opinions about them, and we think we know them. And some of them we hate, some of them we just think are ignorant, some of them we just don't want to be around. And this whole course is really designed to introduce us to them. And so from the Jewish community's point of view, and I suppose Masada in particular in this regard, it's an opportunity for us to meet people that we have an opinion about, but never really been exposed to on a face-to-face basis. Now my background is very similar to most of, at least the Jewish people present's background, which is a traditional background with a very pro-Zionistic, very pro-Israel stance. And Israel, for most of us, is our home, albeit a home away from home. And it's something that we're very passionate. We go to the newspapers regularly. We are staunch defenders of Israel in the public. And despite all we hear about what's going on in Israel, very few of us have ever had the opportunity to visit the places that are so ripe in conflict. And also very seldom have we actually had an opportunity to speak to people that are on the other side of the fence. And so this is a great opportunity to do that. So the evening is not really about me. It's really about Hilmi and his story. And we're privileged to have a number of other Palestinians in the evening, here this evening. But I'd just like to start it off with a personal anecdote, and at that point I suppose I'll sit down. In 2000, during the Olympics, around Darling Harbour, there was a giant screen to show the Olympics. And I was standing over there with my skull cap, my kippah on. And a man with a very strong Arabic accent walked up to me and said, Shalom Aleichem. Sorry, my Arabic accent's not that great. And it was clear that it was Hebrew with an Arabic accent. And I said, Shalom. He said, are you Israeli? I said, no, I'm not. I'm Australian. I said, where are you from? He said, he's Egyptian. We started chatting a little bit. He said, what are you doing here? He was studying at City University. And after that 5 minutes, he says, actually, I'm not Egyptian. But if I told you where I was from, you wouldn't speak to me. And I said, why? Are you Palestinian? And he said, yes, I'm from Gaza. So I said, why do you think I wouldn't speak to you? So he says, I've been dying to have conversations with Jews. But every time I walk up to a Jew to speak to them, they get very frightened and they run away from me. And from a Jewish perspective, I get it. But it also saddens me that on the one hand, how do we have conversations when there's this elephant of fear in the room? And so that's what this evening is really about. This evening is an opportunity to start the conversation, that we can sort of sit along one side or another, disagree, but still enjoy each other's company. So to that end, welcome everybody, and we hope that you have an interesting, confronting evening. Thank you. So the way this is going, I've just got a handful of questions. Hilmi and I have met on a number of occasions, and I'll let him tell that. Just the way we're going to do the questions this evening, just because we're going to try gauge the temperature in the room. But if we're probably going to do questions at the end where people can write down their questions and submit them, and I'll ask them. And I just don't want it to get into a position that it gets overly emotional. We're really here to listen, not to preach, and not to dictate. So we'll see how it goes. All right, Professor, you'll be welcome. Do you want to hold your mic?
Thank you. I can go.
Okay. So as we've been speaking about the fact that you are a Palestinian, that technically you're a Palestinian refugee, even though you weren't born in Palestine, and perhaps you can just broaden and tell us about your story, where you're from, where you grew up, and sort of how you got from where you were to how you are today.
Thank you so much, Gary. Let me first please thank you really wholeheartedly for this opportunity. To my knowledge, there was no Palestinian who talked in a synagogue in Australia, at least. I don't know about other countries, to my knowledge, at least. And if I may make a small preamble of what I'm going to talk about, if I get emotional, and that happens often when I talk even to the Palestinian community, it really happens. I am an emotional person by nature, I'm sorry. That doesn't mean by any means I'm trying to attract any sympathy, really. On the contrary, this may in fact embarrass me and lets me feel a little bit uneasy about it. I think my story and the Palestinian story is much beyond any emotional story or emotional factor. It's much more complex than that. Answering your question, I think I am one of the most lucky refugees, and yes, I call myself a refugee. I didn't suffer much. Tell you my story briefly as much as I can. My parents come from Palestine, my father from Jaffa, my mother from Nablus. This is the country they know as their country, and that's where they materially can trace back their ancestors as much as they could. This is their homeland. They were a happy family. They lived happily in Palestine. My mother was a qualified teacher, but she had 5 kids, so she didn't work. My father was he had his own retail business, men retailing and tailoring. He's a tailor. And they lived quite peaceful, lovely life. To my understanding, their GP was Jew. They had Jewish friends. There was no issues, no problems. And then what happened has happened. Nakba catastrophe in 1948. They had to flee with their skin. In my note you put on the advertising, you said the party. In fact, I used that word because first and foremost, I'm trying to be away from any offending language. But in fact, they didn't go to Syria because they wanted to do sightseeing. Not that they wanted to see what's in Syria, they don't know. In fact, my father and my uncle, who is much older, used to have very strong relationship with Syrian businessmen. And that's why maybe they decided to go to Syria. So their life now is upside down in Damascus. From happy life family to a total agony. They had to rent with my uncle and his sons who were already married and have kids and so forth. So, long story short, there were about 30 people in 3 bedrooms, like absolute poverty and misery. And it took them a while, but luckily enough, my both parents quickly managed to get jobs. They both became teachers, and I am the lucky one. I was born in Damascus. In fact, I was the only one from the 6 brothers and sisters who was born outside Palestine. My next sister was born in 1948, just a few months before they go to Syria. And by the time I had my childhood, I didn't see that misery. I didn't see that poverty in my family. However, I seem to have been my mom's boy. And my mom then at that stage became a principal of school. So I used to go with her. By that time she became a principal of school in Yarmouk camp. It's honorable. which is United Nations Relief and Agency for the Palestinians. And I know by first hand the misery of people in the camps, and she was as well, in fact, quite active in civil society, helping the Palestinian refugees. So I went with her when I was a kid to her field trips for charity and for supporting Palestinians. I heard about these stories day in, day out. It was almost everyday stories. My brother told me later on a story which still really has a long, like a deep scar on me. He said they were sleeping in that room with my uncle and all families in one bedroom, all in mattresses. And my mom thought all the kids have slept, so she told my father, that's maybe 2 or 3 weeks after they arrived to Damascus and rented that home. She told him, please tomorrow, Azmi, go and get us some basic food from Unawa. They used to give flour and milk. My father is a typical Middle Eastern man who thinks as a man he shouldn't cry ever. So he told her, what are you saying? You want me, as a Rabbi, to go and queue for our kids' food? And he cried. My brother told me this story, and I can't forget it for some reason. Anyway, that's really enough. But there is so many stories I can talk about, but maybe it's not really the point. I'm really here tonight is to talk about what can we do for future. Be constructive about the future. In fact, as I said, this is maybe one of the least suffering kids I know. I am, maybe. And just another quick one. My sister, who is 70 years old, she tells me when she was going to school in Damascus, and Damascus had freezing cold winter, she didn't have, my family couldn't afford to buy her a really warming coat, so she cried, and she does cry today when she remembers these things. So you can imagine that this leaves a scar. I was meant to ask one of my friends really to come and talk about their experience. He couldn't make it, and this is absolutely not staged. There's a friend of mine, Dr. George Khatou, and we were just chatting about Dr. Mahmoud Abu Rub, which I have loved to come and tell his story, because his story is much more dramatic. He couldn't make it, and George just told me that he has an interesting story. That's okay. Is it all right for George to
we'll hopefully get a bit of opportunity. I want to just keep on
okay.
script.
That's fine.
Okay. So,
in short, so I grew up, then schools, university, all of that, graduated, moved to Jordan, worked in Jordan for 10 years or so, then moved with my family and my wife and my 3 daughters here to Sydney.
So, as you've explained to me, one of the things you did was help set up the Palestinian Bureau of Statistics in Ramallah.
Correct.
So, I imagine most of us, here have been to Israel, and we know what it's like in Tel Aviv, we know what it's like in Jerusalem, and we know what our fear is as we walk around Israel, and even in the great modern society that modern Israel is. We don't know what it's like for a Palestinian in Ramallah, other than what we hear on the news and the like. Perhaps you could just talk to us what either you've experienced in Ramallah and other places, or what you know has happened, things that you've witnessed.
Thank you. And if I may tell you, again, I'm one of the very lucky Palestinians, again, in West Bank. I didn't live really the standard Palestinian life in the West Bank. Let me tell you how this job came about. I work in Jordan with a German agency that helps developing countries in technical areas. My area was economic statistics, so I was trained by experts, German, European, American, and I went to courses in these countries on how you prepare your economic statistics for countries from which you conclude to have what is called national accounts, that the gross domestic product, national income, all of that. That was my specialty for quite long years. And they said, after Oslo agreements, now we have the opportunity to build, we want a contract to help establishing Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics. So we would like you to come over and be the resident expert. I said, fine, I'm happy to come. I have one condition: my family cannot move, even if they want, because they don't have permanent residency in West Bank. And so I will be commuting every weekend to my family. My mother was also elderly and sick, and I wanted to look after her at least every week. So they said, that's okay, no problem. Agreement with the Palestinian side. First time I get a visa, I crossed the bridge as a Jordanian, because now there is peace between Jordan and Israel. Sorry, it's not the bridge, it's the point north, close to Irbit. It's called Sheikh Hussein. Went to the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics first week. Second week, for that trip to happen, I had to have a visa from the Israeli consulate. Second time, I did that. Third time, I went to the embassy and I said, again, I want multiple visa, please. They said, no, you are not allowed. And I'm sorry to say that wasn't even friendly language. It was very, I said, what's the reason? Did I do anything wrong? The language wasn't very unfriendly. I went to the Germans and said, I'm sorry, I can't do this job. It's obviously not going to work. They said, no, we found out that because we get finance from the German government, it's in fact German government finance project, we can get you an official German passport. So they gave me this red VIP diplomatic passport. I started to go through Limbi Bridge, driving my car from Amman to Ramallah. By the way, for those who don't know, I don't know how much you people know, I mean, the distance from Amman to Ramallah is about 70 kilometers. But for a Palestinian, when they get, and they can get through Limbi, which is the short route, not the Jordanian, which is from the north, it's a day trip. No matter how much you try, it's almost a day trip. I've done it before a long time ago when I was in the uni. My friend was, in fact, was studying with me, was living in Jerusalem, and he invited me and I went with him. Anyway, that made my life much easier. So I started to go to the West Bank with my German official passport, and I was pretty well. It still took 2 to 3 hours, but week in, week out, in and out, I became friends with the security people, and they were nice to me. When I was working with the Palestinians, of course, they were all new graduate, mostly recruits, and I can remember like barely anyone who hasn't been imprisoned in Israeli prisons. Rarely, really. Most of them have, if not imprisoned and tortured. When I was going from Jerusalem, or from Amman, Jerusalem, and Ramallah, there was a lot of checkpoints. Now, I think statistics says there is 500 checkpoints in 560 kilometers in the West Bank. And at that time, it wasn't as bad. However, I still have seen kids being detained on the checkpoints, their hands on the wall. I have seen soldiers slamming them on their face. I didn't know, I couldn't ask. I just wanted to pass safely. Often in the day-to-day, when I was working in Ramallah and the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics, often staff couldn't commute from the villages to Ramallah. Why? Because there's curfew checkpoints, they didn't allow us. And at that time, there was no internet, so it was really wasted time and wasted money. And we, as consultants, we designed the surveys and we trained the trainers. I wasn't meant to go to the field and train the field team. The surveys used to cover West Bank, Jerusalem, and Gaza. More than often, the management of the bureau used to tell me, help me please, because you have the German passport, go to Gaza and train the field there. And I went to Gaza quite a few times, and I've seen these gauges of labor want to go and work in Israel. They wake up 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning to be able to get jobs. But I think it's not there anymore. I don't think there is any worker now who can work in Israel. And in short, that it was bad, but it was not as bad as it has happened. I visited again Palestine in 2010, I think, and I was shocked to see that checkpoint between Jerusalem and Ramallah. It's fortress. It's just plus the wall, plus all of that. That friend which I mentioned, which I visited him, he lives, for some reason, he has the Jerusalem ID. His mother doesn't. She lives also somehow outside what is defined as Jerusalem. She is literally, I visited him in his home, Haiti. She's literally like 3 blocks away from his home. But there is the wall. And he tells me to visit my mother, I have to drive about 20, 25 minutes to go and visit. This is an example of what I know. Well, if you want to know more statistics, there is plenty of statistics. Like you could read that I think there were in 5 years there were 70 women who delivered on the checkpoints, and half of the kids died. There is these cages which the Palestinians use in. There is these roads which are nice, wide, modern roads which I was privileged to use with my German passport. These Palestinians have to use these narrow, dangerous roads with so many accidents. There is all of that. There is statistics that the settler in West Bank uses 370 liters water a day, while the Palestinian uses 70 liters a day. And the water, as I understand, is from the West Bank. There is infinity, but again, I think I would like really to talk about hope, about future.
Okay, so, I mean, definitely we're going to get to the future, but let's just, for understanding. So, you refer to yourself as a refugee, which I think for the Jewish ear is very difficult to hear. Firstly, you yourself, as you read, you were not born in Israel, Palestine, you were born outside. And we're 70 years later. Many of us, myself, our grandparents were refugees from Europe. The many Jews that came from the Arab countries that were expelled in 1948 were also refugees. But none of us still say we're refugees. We've moved on. We've allowed ourselves to say, we're refugees, life was terrible, let's move on. Whereas the Palestinians, there's this refugee mentality where they just won't let go of it. In many cases, to the detriment of their own themselves, where the refugee camps that are both within the West Bank and Syria and beyond, where refugee status has sort of handicapped people from being able to create a new life for themselves, and is fostering a lot of poverty, a lot of resentment and hatred, and it's become really, from an Israeli point of view, the cesspool of hatred and fanaticism. So why are you still a refugee?
Thank you. So, can I ask, when you think these people are saying we are refugees, what do you think from your perspective is making them to say we are still refugees? You are asking. Okay. I think there is multi-angles to this question. I think the analogy with the analogy with the Jews is a little bit inaccurate. I think you change where you live, you go somewhere else for whatever reason. If you are forced out of the place where you think this is my homeland, and you really want and long to go back to your homeland, it's your choice to say, I am a refugee. And I am convinced 100% that this choice is the Palestinians' choice. No one forced it. However, the Arab League, when the 1948 catastrophe happened, made a decision that required all the Arab countries not to give the Palestinians the hosting nationality. By the way, if anyone has any problem with my accent, please tell me. I'll try to repeat if you don't understand. They made a decision that these Arab countries should not give them. And I'm not sure about the motives. Maybe it was good intention, but sorry, in my view, this is a silly decision. Because really what defines your ID is not the paper you hold. Take me an example. I was born in Damascus for Palestinian parents. For quite long years, I was born in Damascus, lived in Damascus until I graduated, moved to Jordan. I got the Jordanian nationality. I have been in Australia 20 years. I have the Australian nationality. I still call myself a refugee because I feel I have a problem. It needs to be sorted out. I feel I have been forced out of my homeland, and that has to be resolved in a very peaceful, logic, like no hurting any party way. So it's a matter of choice. These Palestinians, take for instance the Palestinians in Jordan. Jordan was, for whatever reason, decided not to comply with that Arab League decision, and King Hussein decided, I'm going to give the Palestinian nationality. But you still find camps in Jordan. They have all the rights. They can be they can nominate themselves to the parliament. They have jobs. They can be ministers. But there are a lot of people who live in the camps. I think there is also this feeling for people living in the camps that there is this community who have a shared aspiration and shared problem and shared issue, and they like to do that. That's my guess. I really can't be 100% sure. And that's what it is, in fact.
Sort of here you say, let's call it two separate kinds of refugees. You have the refugee who is like yourself, which I think, as far as analogy goes, from a Jewish point of view, is for before the state of Israel, you had this Jewish longing to go back to Israel, even though we were in the diaspora, and even though we were Poland, Germany, America, Australia, there was this longing. So that's what you are calling from a Palestinian. That's a Palestinian, one kind of refugee. So you have, you're not a refugee as a person who is a countryless, nationalist, lacks nation, lacks status, but you're someone who's longing for the homeland.
Exactly.
But then there's another kind of Palestinian refugee, which is, I suppose, the one that's I struggle with a lot more, and that is the refugee in, whether it be in Bethlehem or in Jordan or in Syria in particular, which has become, I suppose, a real groundswell support for places like Hezbollah, of people who don't have status there, that they don't have a nationality, as far as they don't have voting rights, they don't have public rights within the schools, the medical system, and they're all largely funded by the United Nations and supported by the United Nations. Why are those people still technical refugees? See, I don't think, as much as I appreciate that you feel like a refugee, and I get that, but there are other people who actually have a status of a refugee. They have no country, they have no rights. Why?
For the very same reason I just told you. The Arab League decided, I thought in the detention, I don't know really, that we are not going to give the Palestinians, refugees, nationality, the hosting country nationality. They decided that. And for some internal political reasons in different places, say Lebanon, that went to the extreme. Now, if a Palestinian refugee in a camp in Palestine breaks his window, he has to smuggle the glass to put it in. There are so many specific jobs they are not allowed to work. I'm sorry. I mean, these are our brothers and sisters.
But this is in Lebanon.
This is in Lebanon. For whatever reason, for internal politics reason, I would think mostly there is this balance between Christians and Muslims and things like that. I think they decided we would make maybe their life difficult. Maybe some parts of these references. I can't deny that might exist. Take Syria. I was born in Syria and lived in Syria. Syria dealt with the refugees very fairly, very nicely. I do remember all the laws in Syria used to say these are the laws for Syrian citizens as well as Palestinian refugees. Everything like that it was. They didn't get nationality, but they dealt with the Palestinians on an equal footing, more or less. That has changed, unfortunately, since Assad and Assad father started to change gradually.
So I suppose that leads me into my next question, which is that we as Jews, and I sent you a number of videos that we get exposed to about Palestinian incitement. So TV shows with Farfur, who's a Mickey Mouse type character, praising young children who look forward to either killing Israelis and Jews or martyring themselves. And we look at this and say, if this is how Palestinian children are being educated, and we also hear in the media about textbooks in Palestinian schools, and we think to ourselves, where's this peace partner if this is the stuff that the kids are watching? They are getting praised, the streets are named after martyrs, the terrorists that are sitting in Israeli jails are receiving stipends from the Palestinian governments. And how can we talk peace when there's this culture, as we see it, of incitement and hatred?
All right, good.
I said there would be easy questions.
I don't think it's easy, but I can try to answer. I think we need to look at two streams. One is the official like schooling curriculum, and whatever is private, TV, videos, clips, whatever. I think for the if I talk about Palestine now, the Palestinian Authority, Palestine State, and their curriculum, to my knowledge, they can't put anything aggressive, even if they want to, against Israeli Zionism, whatever. Because all the books, textbooks, are financed by the European Union, World Bank, IMF. It's fine, it's censored by Israel, and directly and indirectly. Even if they want, they can't. When it comes to private, I can't defend any video which condone terrorism, killing civilians. It's wrong. I have no defense for this. It shouldn't happen. However, I really looked at what is happening. Maybe it's a good idea to see what happens on the other side. I came across a study by Professor Nuret Biled El-Hanan. She is Israeli, and she's done a very thorough study on Palestine in Israeli school books. In an interview, she concludes that the content of the books are as follows. I'm sorry, I don't mean to offend again, but this is I'm quoting an Israeli professor specialized in this area. She came across this specific area. She was doing, like, as I understood, much more wider research, but for some reason she ended up, and she wrote a book. That's it. Yeah, the book I'm talking about. She said, if there is a racist manual to write a book, it has been followed by the letter, about the Israeli textbook, on how you textbooks in the schools. She says, school books in Israel legitimate the Nakba. It has enabled us to create a Jewish state. So the Nakba for the Palestinians was the only way to enable us to have our pure Jewish state, or almost pure Jewish state. She says, the Palestinians are never shown as normal human beings. They are terrorists, horde of scary refugees. They are defined as a problem. They are a problem in all aspects, namely development, demography, security. They have no culture. They are. Sorry. Hello? Yeah. Hearing me? Okay. Yeah, they are not part of any culture. And she was asked whether Israel textbooks also calls for peace and coexistence, and she says Israel never has peace education or coexistence program. It's based on panic, anxiety of incompletion. There is this concept of incompletion. It has a term in Hebrew which I couldn't fully understand, but what it says, as I understood it, it says as long as there is this minority, called Palestinians, are there, there is this incompletion of our project. There is something is incomplete. Our project is incomplete. On the private scene, like as I said, there can be mistakes on both sides. But I can tell you a few examples on the much more higher level. Prime Minister Netanyahu in his elections in campaign during 2015 has said, I think you've all heard that in fact the Palestinians were the people who advised Hitler to burn the Jews. And to my knowledge, there was not a single Israeli historian who agreed on this. Not only that, Germany, Angela Merkel, who is now building 3 submarines, 1 financed and 2 fully donated to Israel, has said this is not true. I don't understand. Why do you say such a thing? What do you mean to say? Are you meaning to say these people are real enemy as a whole? I don't know. I can't understand really what's the purpose. Shall I quote Avigdor Lieberman when he says, behead Arab Israelis, opposite of state, and so forth? In fact, he has, I don't want to quote him because I'm trying to be again optimistic, but he has one very interesting quote. He says, Netanyahu isn't left or right. He has no ideology. He is the ultimate Mr. Zigzag. He may be the world champion of zigzaggers. Shall I quote the Justice Minister, Ayelet Shaked? She is the Justice Minister. She posted something online on Facebook which appeared to brand all Palestinians enemy combatants and legitimate targets. That got thousands of Facebook likes. Or shall I quote Deputy Defense Minister Eli Ben Dahan, who said, to me, Palestinians are like animals, they are not human. I'm sorry.
No. I couldn't handle what you were saying. I mean, it's just anecdotally, when I was in Ramallah at the beginning of last year, I was going, and I was asking my Palestinian guide, how do you want me to feel when I go through here and I see that this road has been named after a martyr, and this one's been named after what I consider a terrorist, and this one's been named after a terrorist. I said, how does that, relate to me? How am I supposed to look at you as a peace partner? And he said to me, when I go through Jerusalem, I see Menachem Begin Boulevard, and I see, this army unit over there. These are the people who killed my family. So why are you telling me that you don't feel safe when I don't feel safe either? So I suppose in many areas is that we look and say, but perhaps it just flows over us and we don't notice it, of what the things that our leaders say. But that being said, I don't think you can get away from the fact that there's a lot of incitement, at least where we're hearing a lot of incitement, not so much from the leadership, which we do hear, but also on the ground. So, to that end, I think I speak for everybody in the room on our side. We say that we want peace. And we just don't know or sense that there's any partners for peace on the other side. So I'd just like to hear your comments on, do you want peace? And what do you think the real hurdles to peace are from your side?
Thank you. I 100% share with you that we all want peace. We can't keep going with this conflict. There are much more complex conflicts in my view. South Africa, Ireland have been resolved, while ours is not. In my view, there are 3 main problems that blocking the peace. Let me go one step back, please, and tell you, based on, this is academic studies, based on 60 years academic, based on evidence study on international conflicts, there is one main reason why conflicts can't be resolved, and there is a block in that. And that main reason is imbalance of power. It's an evidence-based study. If there is imbalance of power, you can't resolve. You will go nowhere. To resolve a conflict, you need balance of power, and power doesn't necessarily mean military power. And you need a way out. In our case, I think we have three major problems. This imbalance of power, one. And secondly, and this is very important, the mindset on both sides. And thirdly, there is unfortunate crisis in leadership on both sides. And let me elaborate a little bit on the second one, which is the mindset. I think, first and foremost, there is this culture and education at Israeli society. I'm sorry, because I know you said there's excitement, but from what I know, from what I read, in the way the Israeli generations are brought up in the education, I really wonder whether they see us as human beings. I have the feeling they don't, and that's how I feel it, at least. On the other hand, there is this totalitarian ideology that in Israel, no one really can speak against this culture. If anyone speaks against this culture, there is this box that has been repeated over and over, and it's so much engraved. And anyone speaks outside this box, if they are Jews, they are self-hating Jews. If they are not Jews, they are anti-Semitic. And that's, in my view, is terrible and not healthy. Not healthy even for anti-Semitism. And I really like to say this clear and loud. If I have an enemy in my life, it's anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is terrible. Who denies it doesn't know what he is talking about. There is anti-Semitism, but unfortunately, the Jews, Israel, is not dealing with it the right way. And I can quote to you today, from what I have just read today on the leader of Jewish Congress about Israel inflicting wounds in itself. I can give you the name, you go and check it. And there is definitely crisis of leadership on both sides, unfortunately. On the Israeli side, there is this extremism, regardless of what it is causing. If I were Baby Netanyahu, I don't know how I can sleep. Baby Netanyahu is going to go. He will enjoy the cigars he's got or whatever. and he is going to go, and I'm going to go, and we are all going to go. The question is, what are we really doing for our new generations? Can we live together or no? I think we definitely can. If we change our mindset, we have to change this mindset if we want to live together and achieve peace and live together peacefully. And that's not impossible whatsoever at all. It has happened in other countries, it will happen in other conflicts, it can happen in the Middle East. We just need proper leadership. On the Arab side, so I don't seem to be biased. On the Arab side, okay, let me say Arab side, two things. The Arab leaders apart from Palestine, I think, and that's part of the imbalance of power, the Arab world is in absolute disarray, absolute chaos. You couldn't have worse than the current situation. If you look by microscope to try to find lousy leadership, you will struggle to get the leadership we have now in the Arab world. And that's mainly and most and foremost for the dictatorship regimes we have. We don't have democracy. We have one hope in Tunisia. There was hope that this will go and expand to other countries, but the counter-revolution was very, very strong. However, this can change. I am hoping things will change, and I'm hoping we will. Okay, so I want to go back to the Palestinian side. Simply, when it comes to Abbas, for instance, I think really he hasn't, no one taught him, no one read to him. He has never read, I think, this academic study which says if there is no balance of power, there is nothing that will like encourage, I don't want to use another word, the other party to sit with you and give you anything. I'm sorry, in my language there is naivety there. It's naive thinking. He thinks because he has the international law and court of justice and this and that, that's good enough, and that's not good enough at all. You can't go really to a table of negotiations when you have no more cards. And again, I don't mean necessarily at all violence or military power.
You can just talk to the changing mind. You just talked about the changing mindset. So you talked about how the Israelis need to change their mindset. Can you perhaps talk about how the Palestinians need to change their mindset?
I'm sorry, it was really missed by me. We have to do also our homework, and we have to do some changes on our side. If there are Palestinians now who think and believe that Palestine will come back as it was before 1948, we have to educate them that this is not going to happen. It's simply not going to happen because it is not practical and not ethical. There is now a generation, 2-3 generations who lived in Israel. They know no place other than Israel, and they are going to stay there. Take me as an example. Maybe until I was in high school, uni, I used to think, yes, there is injustice occurred to us. We were expelled from our homeland. These people came from Europe. Everything should go back where it was. But now, with maturity and years and experience and talking to many people and talking to a lot of Jews as well, I realized this is not practical and this is not possible. We have to live together. And if you ask me how is the peace process, if you want me to give you my view on how the peace process will go, I think currently the viable option is the two-state solution. However, I think really there is this problem of right of return. I personally will never give up this right, and I'm teaching my daughters, and I know so many Palestinians. I can't remember anyone who told me, yeah, I'll give up my right of return. Unfortunately for you, this is the fact. So my view is two-state solution. We have to live together as neighbors, fade away and get rid of the hatred, deal peacefully, build normalized relationship, and maybe in 10, 15 years we say, why do we need two nations? Why do we need two countries? We really would like to have one country and live all together in one country as modern, secular, democratic country. Any religion-based state, in my view, doesn't fit the modern, the modern life we live, period. It just doesn't stand. I don't accept it for Saudi Arabia, I don't accept it for Israel, I don't accept it for Italy, personally. It doesn't, and I think there are so many people around the world who accept that. Let me say in relation to that, and that's also where I tell you we have to change. Even before I start to become an activist as a Palestinian for the peace in Palestine and between Palestine and Israel, I had talked with, in fact, Israeli immigrants here. Maybe it's like 10 years ago, and even more. And through work, one of my friends works in PricewaterhouseCoopers, and he got to talk to Israeli immigrants. And then it happened that we decided 4 of us from each side will sit together and talk. And I learned this thing which I feel is quite deeply rooted in the Jewish culture. The Jewish they think, for sure, I think maybe most of them, we have to rule ourselves. And I can fully understand that based on persecution over 2,000 years, Holocaust, before Holocaust, so many terrible experiences. They don't trust anyone to rule them. And whether I agree with this or no, this is a fact. I have to deal with it. That's why I think, although I would love to go to Jaffa tomorrow, regardless whether I really work there or no, or live there or no, but that's a matter of choice. But my homeland is Jaffa, and that's where I would love to have the choice to live. That's a different story. But because I am pragmatic, because I'm trying to understand your psyche, I'm saying, let's have two-state solution for the moment until all hatred goes away. We live together. We can really be together very successfully. In relation to that, you just asked me about my experience in West Bank. Oslo Accord was new, and that was because I worked in 96 to 98. And my family visited me in Ramallah, and we used to go and go to the beaches in Tel Aviv and enjoy shopping and talk to the people and have jokes. And I really felt, what's the problem in having peace with these people? There is no problem whatsoever. And I had my sister to come and visit me with her family, and we toured around. We were so happy, everything was fine, no issues. We used to joke sometimes with the soldiers on the checkpoints. But then everything went wrong for whatever. Again, I don't think we need to go and say who did wrong, who said wrong, at what time. I think we need to look for the future. It's really a big burden on us that we work together, that we achieve peace and live together in peace.
So I suppose the last question that I have, and you answered a number of the questions I had sort of by the way, so the questions of recognizing the state of Israel, which clearly you do see Israel as a very real reality that the Palestinians need to learn to accept. And the change in mindset, which one of my questions was, well, between 1948 and 67, Israel wasn't in the West Bank and Gaza, there wasn't peace, and you've answered that in saying that that's a changed mindset of the Palestinians, that perhaps once upon a time there was a hope for everything, and now there's a hope to let's get something. I suppose my last question is, are you a lone voice in this? We speak with you and I, and I want, I imagine many of our community can walk away saying, well, he was a very nice guy, he's very peace-loving, he talks a great talk, but he's one guy. There's Hamas, there's Hezbollah, there are all these people, and the reality is that the majority of the Palestinians are Hamasniks. They just want to destroy the state of Israel, and so they got some moderates. Like, what, in your experience, what percentage of the Palestinian community do you think you represent?
I said there are Palestinians who think that Palestine has to. I have no actual statistics, but I really think there are. I think polls say that there are quite few polls on both sides, and some have been done like a partnership between Israeli polling company and Palestinian. Majority of Palestinians and Israelis want peace and want two-state solution, which means, I think, if you want to go by the polls, majority of the Palestinians want to live even happy to sacrifice and live in 22% of what they thought this is their homeland and live in peace. Unfortunately, I think the poll says that it used to be 60-70%, but with the way things going, it has got back a little bit, so now it's about 55%. And I think this again has to do with the narrative and with the way the politicians are leading us. It's terrible, the way things are going. And that's why I thank you at the beginning, and I still thank you for giving me this opportunity, and we should build on that. It has to come from the grassroots. We have to work together. These politicians, by nature, they have their agendas. And unfortunately, there are very few people in history who put in my view, who put the nation's interest ahead of their personal agendas. And we have to think about it, honestly. Sorry, again, okay, how much I represent here, that was one fact. You said Hamas even last year issued, after quite long years of discussion internally, I think in that, I don't want to defend them, I don't believe in any political party based on religion. Period. Any mix between religion and politics, in my view, my personal view, is wrong. However, they said in their political document that there is a consensus between the Palestinians now that we can live in a two-state solution, and that's fine for now. But the Prime Minister on the TV, he torn down the paper and said this doesn't worth to be read. I think I really can't. I possibly don't know or can't advise, but if I were a leader on the other side, I would say this is a good initiative. Let's build on that, and maybe that would have encouraged Hamas to say, well, let's go to the next step. We need really people who have this vision. Maybe at one point of time, Rabbi had it, and unfortunately he was assassinated. But at the current time, I don't see much of hope, I'm sorry. Not on that side. But there are quite few other things which I think are important and give me hope. And if I may answer this in a way a little bit untraditional, because what gives me hope may give you despair, and vice versa. In fact, although really, that's not true, what I'm going to mention is good for both of us, because we want to, as much as possible, to eliminate these blocks we have talked about. Let me tell you what gives me some hope. I was listening to APAC conference in USA lately, and I heard the speaker of the Democratic, he's the speaker of the Democratic Senate. So I heard the speaker in the APAC, and he was the Senate Democratic Minority Leader. He's called Charles Chung, and he says the biggest threats we have that the Jewish generation in USA, in example, don't have this love to Israel we have. My own interpretation really is that this generation have assimilated more in the culture, and that article I can also mention now. It says exactly the same thing by the leader of Congress, Jewish Congress. He was, I think. And there is, and unfortunately, I'm sorry to say again, there is these people who think outside this box narrative which has been fed to the Israeli people year after year, education, media, everything. That doesn't marry with their values in USA, the younger generation. They say, no, we don't agree on that. And that gives me hope. There is also, the fact that the BDS, the boycott, divestment and sanctions, is growing, day in, day out, like it or not. It reflects that there is more and more awareness around the world that there is some injustice the Palestinians have been under, and that has to be resolved. I think to that as well, there is an important change in the trend. The days where Israel used to be the destination of so many young Westerners who used to go and work in the kibbutz, it doesn't seem to be as attractive as before. There is more and more awareness again by Westerners that there is something wrong. We may think people are busy with life, they don't know much, whatever, but I don't think that people are really careless. I think things build up a bit by bit. There are certain significant, important phenomena that doesn't happen overnight. It builds a bit by bit. I heard you guys telling me that you feel there is a bit of anti-Semitism. And I would like you and all Jewish community here, and I know I don't have a voice, to think whether this current policies of Israel is healthy for this anti-Semitism or not. I think it is not. Because people are seeing that the current policies is not good. It doesn't really give the Palestinians any right. The situation in Gaza Strip is not acceptable. It's a shame on the human face. That cannot happen. And the culture we talked about more than once, that that culture has one other angle, in fact, that says, how do I put that? That culture says that any criticism, again we talked about that any criticism to Israel is anti-Semitic. I think that has to change, in my view, because that's harmful for anti-Semitic. People started to realize what is right, what is wrong. You can't keep using that same narrative again and again because it becomes counter-effective, in my view.
So, just to try to distill some of the ideas, I think that in my experience in dialogue with Palestinians and others, is that the most hopeful path to peace is engaging sort of on the level we are. I think that our leaders are, whatever their agendas may be, I think that if there is going to be peace in Israel and in Palestine, it's going to come from the bottom up rather than from the top down. And to that end, just I think we'll start wrapping up. And I'd like to thank you, because I think it takes a lot of courage to come into the Jewish community. You're very passionate about your faith, but you're not a professional speaker. And no offense, I mean that in the nicest way, but deliberately so. What I wanted when in organising this, I didn't want someone who was going to be sick and someone who's going to be polished. I wanted someone who's going to be genuine and authentic. And I thank you for that, because you've been authentic. So I imagine a lot of what you've said has made people feel uncomfortable. I don't agree with everything you've said, and so we can. I think that, and we can just talk a little bit. I think that I don't necessarily think that all criticisms of Israel is anti-Semitic, but I definitely think that every anti-Semite finds a lot of opportunity to say things against Israel. I don't think that BDS is necessarily anti-Semitic, but every anti-Semite supports the BDS. And I think that when you find criticism of Israel, you'll find a lot of support in people that you might not want the support from. Because if you have an anti-Semite in your midst who's just jumping on the bandwagon, it gives me the opportunity to completely ignore you. Because, well, this guy's a known anti-Semite, why would I listen to you? I can see your crowd that you're hanging with, the people who are coming to your protest. So when we see Palestinian protests at Town Hall, and we see an Israeli flag with a swastika instead of the Star of David, it gives us enough reason to say, there's nothing legitimate about this. This is just this Israel-hating bashing. But that being said, and I want to sort of wrap up. I know you've got a lot to say, but...
No, sure, quickly.
But,
please.
Okay, go for it.
All right. One side for that culture which I talked about, really, I told you that I got to learn that you Jews like to think we have to rule ourselves to be safe for future. I got that. I think you really need to understand a little bit of my psyche and the Palestinian psyche. I really ask you to open your mind and heart to that. What we think on the other side, from that narrative and culture you have been fed all through years, that you guys are looking for excuses to keep the status quo. And on the grassroots, maybe not. But when I hear Prime Minister says that, I think it's being exploited to the max. And every time there is an excuse. We have no partner, there is Hamas. You wouldn't find someone so much reconciliatory as Abbas. There are still, I don't know, there is this culture of looking in microscope to find an excuse. If you give me as a Palestinian equal right and deal with me as a human being and we achieve peace, I'm going to be at the forefront to fight anti-Semitism, because any racism based on color, on race, on religion, on whatever should be fought. Period. I will be ahead of you in fighting that anti-Semitism. And if I know there is one anti-Semitic comes and support me in BDS, I will tell him honestly now, not in future, not when we have achieved peace. I will tell him, thank you, I don't need your help. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll leave it for 5 minutes. Hilmi, would you prefer people write questions down, or you think? I'm going to, with permission, I'm going to open up to the floor. But please, this is, as we're all very passionate about the topic at hand, and I'm going to ask everybody to keep your questions concise and respectful, and for them to be questions, not statements. I know everybody knows what the truth is, but if there are any questions, you okay with that, Jung? Okay, great. So, what's the question? Just so everyone else can hear you.
Thank you for sharing your comments. I was in Israel in 73 for a family wedding, and walking in the old streets of Jerusalem. I remember walking down the street, and there was a Jewish store. Right next door to that, there was a Christian merchant, and then the next little store was a Muslim guy selling his wares. And my comment when I came back was how amazing this was. The three religions are living together, working together, and in peace. And it was shortly after that, it was about 3 months after that, that war broke out in the Middle East. And my thoughts were, this isn't the people in Israel. Who caused this, or who started this? Because my impression from walking in the streets of Jerusalem, that the people were all happy living together, the three different religions. My question is, who started the trouble? Because I'm saying the people living in Israel seem happy living with each other.
Your mic works. You got a mic? You got a mic.
Okay. In my view, I think, to be honest with you, you see three store men working next to each other and everything is peaceful. Doesn't necessarily they are happy and satisfied. Are you agreeing? Yeah. Doesn't mean that they are happy and satisfied. I think this is staged happiness. They are happy and satisfied when the Christian can go and practice without harassment, without their church being had taxes that they had to close it. When he can go and live back and live if he can and visit his family or go to Beit Jala and Beit Lahem without going through so many checkpoints and so forth. For the Muslim, he can go and visit his family or friends in Israel in 1948. I think we shouldn't judge by the picture. We should really ask the people how they feel. Wars can happen and they shouldn't happen. Simply put, in my view, any kind of war, I'm sorry, but it is childish. When we were in schools, we were immature, young, teenagers. When we have an argument with our peers, the first thing we go is maybe fist fighting. But when we become mature, I really can't believe, I can't comprehend, there are two mature people who have the will and intention to solve the most complex problem, cannot find proper solution. I don't believe that there is a shortage on how we can come up with a solution that satisfies every single one of us. Of course, not perfect, but at least we may not, let me say not satisfy, but maybe improve and makes it much better, and this is definitely better than having wars.
My question is probably a little bit, well, it comes from my heart. But you said that you have told Palestinians that things will never go back to the way they were. This is what I understood you said. At another stage, you said that you will not let go of the idea of the law of return. I can't understand how those two can be compatible.
I don't see any discrepancy.
The law of return is about returning.
Yes.
And then
But
you've said...
let me clarify. I think the political solution I think of, and as Gad said very correctly, I am not a speaker, I'm not a politician, but in my humble view is to go for two-state solution, and that has to go very quickly and urgently, and by time people will decide, the solution currently should come up with a solution that says the right of return has to be maintained and whatever discussed and maintained until there is this happen. I can't tell you exactly how it can be worked, but that right of return cannot be given up. Me, personally, I will never give up my right of return for a very simple reason, not because of any emotional or whatever side. It's for a simple reason that I will not give up my right based on merit of power or because there are facts on the ground. I'm sorry, I can't do that. It's a matter of principle for me. What I say is Palestinians will not go back and live in Palestine and the Jews will go back and live where they came from. No, that's not acceptable. The Jews who have lived there for now 70 years, they have to stay there, and they are more than welcome to stay there. And there is no problem whatsoever by time when we have peace, when we build this trust and we be partners, and we can live together peacefully and use like in any democratic secular country. And look, I think we can together do a miracle. The Jews don't need my testimony. They are known top country in R&D, in research and development. They are one of the biggest hubs, the most successful hubs in IT. Out of 900 Nobel Prize winners, 22% are Jews. But also the Palestinians are sincere, hardworking. Ask professionals in Saudi Arabia, in Emirates, in Kuwait. We really did a great job, and they know how much we love our work and how much we value life and how much we love to live a peaceful life. We have in Palestine the highest territory holders among the whole world. The illiteracy rate or literacy is 98. Take India or Egypt, it's 97, 75 in India, 75 in Egypt. I think together, and I know for a fact that the Israelis who have businesses, they had Palestinians working for them, and when there was issues and problems, they couldn't get permits. They brought some from Thailand and Taiwan, and they said, no, they are not like the Palestinians. We are hardworking, and together, there are Palestinians who achieved really milestones in inventions, in the best teacher last year, the best school, we can together make a miracle in the Middle East. This is an area that is going to be strategic and it has a lot of potential, and we can together make a miracle. Let's give this a chance, please.
My spot there again. So we'll allow one more question and then we'll allow.
You've mentioned that you're optimistic about peace in the future based on several signs and indications that you're seeing on both sides today. So my question to you is, how does the current status and the presence of the settlements in the West Bank fit into your vision and optimistic view for the future?
Well, I think that doesn't need to be a lot of explanation. I just said that our President Abbas, which I don't agree with the basics of negotiations he's going by. In my view, he's one of the most reconciliatory leaders in the world, and he says it's only what the international law gives us is the basis of our conflict, and that's how we are going to resolve it. What's happening is the other side is building the settlements, and as very good Palestinian journalist has put it, like me and you negotiating on the piece of pizza while the other side is really eating it. So by the time there will be nothing left. I mean, and what Abbas said, please stop these settlements so we start genuine, meaningful negotiations. And the other side is saying, no, of course, they can't. It doesn't make sense. I make with you negotiations when you are building settlements. And more settlements. Doesn't make any sense, I think, in any man's objective mind.
Right, well, firstly, Yomi, thank you so much. I have a small gift just to thank you so much for and I'd just like to thank everybody for coming this evening and being a part of this evening. We are trying new things. Please stay around and mingle. There are people from different cultures, both from the Palestinian and broader community. Stick around for a little bit. Thank you so much. If you haven't written your email down outside and you would like to be on the email list, not only to know about more programs like this, but also we'd like to get your feedback and some survey forms. So please stick around and have a wonderful evening. Try to stay dry. Thank you very much.